Hello viewers, welcome to K Diagnostics, Dio here. Today we have a 2008 Toyota Avalon with a 3.5 liter. In this video I'm going to show you how to remove and replace a front drive axle and front brake pads and the brake rotor. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the tire. Alright, we're going to retract the caliper piston. I'm going to pry the caliper towards me. So we're going to undo these two 14mm bolts. So these two bolts hold the caliper on the caliper bracket. So now we're going to lift the caliper and push it out of the way. Now I'm going to use this bungee cord to hang the caliper up here because we don't want the caliper hanging on its hose. So we're going to hang it up here. We got the caliper out of the way. So now we're going to remove the pads. Now look how worn out these pads are. Do you see how thin the pads have become? Okay. So now I'm going to remove these two bolts to remove the caliper bracket. And these bolts are 17mm bolts. Now we have to make sure that the caliper pins slide in and out easily. So that's good. We're gonna loop them when we put the caliper bracket back on. Alright, so we got the caliper bracket out of the way. So now I'm going to tap the brake rotor so we can remove it. So just like that, I'm going to remove the brake rotor. So now the next step is going to be undoing the drive axle nut. I removed the brake rotor and the pads because we're going to replace them. But if we were not removing the pads and the rotor, I was just going to leave them on because you don't have to remove the brake pads and the brake rotor to remove the drive axle. Okay? So now let's remove this axle. So here comes the axle nut. So let's use this air hammer. There you go. All right. We did push the axle back a little bit. So now I'm going to undo the two strut bolts to release the steering knuckle from the strut so we can remove the drive axle. So here is the drive axle. Now at this point the drive axle should be able to come out. I'm gonna go under the transmission and pry the drive axle out, okay? So I am prying the drive axle from the inside joint. So right there. So we replaced this drive axle because this boot over here is torn, okay? And it was leaking grease up here. So we're gonna get this out of the way. Now we're gonna install our drive axle. There was a lot of grease over here. I had to wipe this grease down because the old drive axle leaked out a lot of grease over here. Okay, so we got that wiped down. So here comes the axle. So we're gonna make sure it's lined up right there. And then we're gonna push it back. We're gonna tap it a little bit. So just like that, the axle is installed. We're gonna spin it and make sure the splines are completely engaged in the transmission. All right, so that's good. So now let's put everything back together. I'm gonna apply a little bit of anti-seize compound on this axle splines. Just like that. Okay, so now we're gonna install the axle on the steering knuckle. All right, so now I'm gonna use a torque wrench to torque the bolts for the strut. And the torque spec for the strut bolt is 95 foot-pounds. So that's torqued up to 95 foot-pounds. So now we're gonna torque the other one. All right, so we got these two bolts torqued down. So now we're gonna install our brake rotor. So I'm applying a little bit of anti-seize compound on the flange here. All right, so we cleaned the rotor to remove the grease that they put at the factory so that these rotors don't rust. So that's good. So now the next step is going to be installing the caliper bracket. So here is our caliper bracket. I put new caliper pads hardware on it. I also greased the caliper pins. Okay, so the bracket is prepped and ready to be installed. So now I'm going to install it. Now I'm going to torque the caliper bracket bolts. The torque spec for the caliper bracket bolts is 65 foot-pound. So right there, that's torqued. I torqued both caliper bracket bolts. Now we're going to install the brake pads. So I got the pads installed. So now I'm going to bring my caliper over here. I'm gonna retract the caliper piston even further in. So I don't know if you can see, I put some grease on the caliper jars right there, and I retracted the piston all the way in. So now I'm gonna torque the caliper bolt. The torque spec for the caliper bolt is 35 foot-pounds. Right there, that's torqued. Now we're gonna torque this one. So that's torqued. This one is also torqued, so we're good back here. So now we're gonna torque the drive axle nut. The torque spec for the drive axle nut is 110 foot-pounds. All right, we're gonna torque this nut. So right there, the drive axle nut is torqued. So I'm gonna pinch the nut, and after that we're gonna install the tire. Alright, the lug nuts are torqued to 95 foot-pounds. Alright guys, so I'm gonna leave this right over here. This is how you remove and replace a front drive axle and the brake pads and the brake rotor on this 2008 Toyota Avalon with a 3.5 liter. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.